Well, good afternoon and welcome. It's 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. My name is Ursel Maynor, and we are going to begin our session. The session is FEHB Family Matters. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Looking forward to an informative exchange of information. Just a few housekeeping rules. All of the participants are on mute, but we do want to have interaction. So if you look at the top right of your screen, you will see a Q&A button. And on the Q&A, you can insert your questions related to the session. I'm being assisted today by Maggie Martell. She will monitor the Q&A. And there will be a couple of opportunities within the session for you to ask questions. So I would encourage you to add your questions as we go through. The session will be recorded and available later. Most of you should have received a copy of the slides. In order to receive your credits for the session, you will need to complete the questionnaire, which will be sent to you later by Vodo. Our topic is FEHB Family Matters, and the session is related to a final rule which OPM Healthcare and Insurance issued related to family member eligibility. The rule was issued in 2018, and it has three parts. The first part, we issued guidance in 2018 to remove eligible family members. An eligible family member is someone such as a spouse who may have other coverage and does not want to be covered with the FEHB enrollee, or an adult child who may have their own job, particularly enrolled in a high deductible health plan, and they need to be removed from the FEHB coverage in order to be covered. So this is guidance we published in 2018. The second set of guidance was regarding removal of ineligible family members from the FEHB. We published this guideline in November of 2020. And the third set of guidance was issued just in April. Family member eligibility verification for FEHB on the initial opportunity to enroll and for all qualifying life events. So our time today is going to be spent on these last two carrier letters. The session will be in two parts. I'm going to go through removal of ineligible family members first. We'll have a Q&A, and then the second part will be the verification of family members. And as I said, during the session, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A, and Maggie will gather them, and she and I will talk, and we'll try to answer your questions. So let's begin with some high-level discussion. First of all, the main thing I want to, and I'm sure you all know, is that agencies are responsible for determining which employees are eligible for FEHB coverage. Agencies enroll the employees and the family members, and this process is decentralized because of that. Agencies have developed their own internal processes and procedures to determine how to enroll employees and family members. In addition, employees with self and family enrollment can call the carriers and add members to their family, and the agency doesn't know about it. So we have some agencies that have centralized enrollment. It's all electronic. Some agencies have a combination of paper enrollments for initial opportunities to enroll. Some have QLEs that are both paper, and some systems are only electronic during open season. Currently, we have 4.2 million family members enrolled in the FEHB, and some have been enrolled for long periods of time because we have employees who spend their whole careers, 20, 30 years in the federal government, and many times those family members have never been verified. They've just been added over time. The second problem we have with the family members is there's variations in how and when and if a family member supporting documentation is kept. Some agencies accept electronic submissions for family members. Others enroll by paper. They may or may not keep it. We have health plans that also enroll family members, as I said. In general, the health plans will keep the family member supporting documentation because they are subject to OPM OIG audits. But how they keep it, how long they keep it varies. Some plans request the documentation when they add family members, some of them don't. So there's a great deal of variation in whether family member documentation is even available. The third issue is that even if family member documentation is received, it's not shared. Agencies don't share the verifying documentation with the carriers. FEHB carriers do not share the verifying documentation when an enrollment is transferred to another plan. The carriers don't share the information with the employing office. And most importantly, one of the main problems is family member verification is not shared with retirement services, so that when an employee retires, retirement winds up having to verify family member eligibility. So there's lots of duplication and inconsistencies across the entire FEHB enrollment, which is very large. The diagram that you see is just a visual presentation of the many systems that are involved in FEHB enrollment. We have payroll providers such as MyPay, DFAS, NFC. We have all of the agencies across all of the branches of the federal government. You'll see State Department has their system. It's paper. U.S. Courts is an electronic system. And then you have the 90 plus carriers, Aetna, Kaiser, NLC. And there's all kinds of variation in how the enrollments are processed. So this creates the complexity, and is also one of the reasons it has taken OPM such a long time to really get this guidance out. The other issue is that OPM had not previously issued a consistent set of documentation standards for verifying family members, so that resulted in agencies and carriers developing their own individual standards. With the issuance of these two guidance, we have now established one consistent set of family member documentation that all agencies and all carriers must use. We will dive into this a little bit more as we go through the presentation, but what I do want to bring to your attention is when we issued the removal guidance in November, attachment number 5 had the documentation standards. We did make a small tweak to some of the standards when we issued the family member verification guidance in April. So the set of documentation standards that you want to use is attachment number 2 related to the verification family member. So again, we'll talk about this more. I will bring to your attention that there are 2 sets of documentation, sets of documentation that can only be completed by the employing office, and that is the new foster child certification and the new common law marriage certification. And I'll go over those shortly. So the first part, we're going to talk about the removal of ineligible family members from FEHB. And just to assess what's going on with the audience, Maggie is going to put a couple of questions in the Q&A, and I would just ask that you would respond to those questions. When we come to the first Q&A a little bit later, I'm going to start with the responses to these 2 or 3 questions that we put in, and then we will take any questions from the audience. So as I've said, if you have questions during the presentation, please feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we'll go over them at the appropriate time. For the removing of ineligible family member guidance, we have authorized both the employing office and FEHB carriers to identify enrollee family members that they want to request more information about. There are times when an employing office may look at an SF 2809, see a whole lot of family members and have questions. It could be employees that have questions, that have children that are very close in age, say 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and you're like, I'm not quite sure if that's accurate. Are they all the employees' children? Do they belong to the sister? Do they belong to the neighbor? What's the story? So the removal guidance allows the carriers and the benefits officers to request proof of family member eligibility. We have provided sample letters in the guidance, and you send these out to the enrollees with a copy to the carriers, and it gives them 60 days to provide supporting documentation to the agency. The option to not respond is not there because the letters say that on day 61, if you do not contact us for an extension or you do not provide the information, then your family member will automatically be removed from FEHB coverage. It does also provide them with reconsideration rights within 60 calendar days. So this allows the agency or the carriers now to request an employee to verify that their family member is eligible to be on FEHB coverage. And this is not unusual. The FEHB is one of the few programs that really does not require verification of family members. So we're trying to catch up here. Your family member eligibility documentations is for a spouse. If they're married less than 12 months, then a marriage license. If they're married more than 12 months, we require the marriage license and something else that says that they're still married. It could be a federal or state tax form that lists them both, or we've added that if they send in, say, a utility bill, they still have to provide some proof of financial interdependency, such as a shared bank account or a credit card. Because a utility bill doesn't mean that you're married, it just means that you're both in the same house. For children under 26, we've requested that they send in a copy of the birth certificate. If it's a stepchild, we've added that they send in the birth certificate for the stepchild, but also proof that the enrollee and the spouse, the stepchild's parent, are still married. And then we have criteria for children who are disabled and incapable of self-support. We are aware that it needs to be updated. We are working on that. It's a little bit difficult and a little bit complicated, but for now, we're going to maintain those same standards that we have listed in the FEHB handbook. As stated earlier, we do have 2 new forms. We currently have a foster child affidavit in the FEHB handbook. We've updated that to a foster child certification that requires that the supporting documentation be reviewed and signed off by an HR specialist. The form that was in the FEHB handbook was a self-attesting affidavit, but now this requires that the HR independently verify the documentation. The second new form is a common law marriage declaration. There are only about 10 states that still ask for, that allow and recognize common law marriage, but we were frequently being asked by agencies to develop a form to standardize that. So we do have the form, and I'm going to go over it in a few minutes. So if an FEHB carrier reaches out to an employee and the employee has either a foster child or a common law marriage, then the employee or the agent or the carrier is going to reach out to the employing office to obtain that documentation. The documentation is to be only completed by the employing office and stored in the EOPF. We have worked with the Guide to Personnel Record Keeping EOPF staff to allow these new documentation to be added to the files. So diving a little deeply into the foster child certification, the form is going to be either a government issued birth certificate or other document verifying the child's date of birth, that the child is under 26. We have documentation that regular and substantial support, proof of the child as a dependent on your insurance and or any other state or federal program, and if applicable, a copy of a court order naming the employee or the spouse as the child's legal guardian. And again, once this documentation is gathered, you do not need to keep the original documentation, you just need to keep the certification. The certification is added to the employee's EOPF behind the SF 2809, and that way going forward, this enrollee does not have to recertify this child as being a foster child. When the carrier reaches out, either you or the employee can go into the EOPF and send them a copy of the foster child certification. We have been asked for some criteria for regular and substantial support. So we pulled a sample of what would be considered regular and substantial support from FEHB. And it says eligibility, evidence of eligibility as a dependent child, proof of inclusion of the child as a dependent on income tax returns, canceled checks, money orders, receipts for periodic payments, child care, daycare expenses, clothing, etc. Evidence of goods or services which show regular or substantial contribution. And the last one says any other evidence which OPM shall find sufficient proof of support. But I can say right now we have not developed any other evidence. So the foster child certificate would satisfy the requirements for regular and substantial support. For common law marriage, what we've asked for is a declaration from the employee, a court order or judgment recognizing the marriage from a state. The states that I'm aware of that still recognize common law marriage are Colorado, Iowa, Kansas, Montana, New Hampshire, Texas, Utah. Or there's an employee declaration that they fill out with certain information that we've included in the attachment to the guidance, such as the date and the state in which the enrollee and spouse mutually agreed to become married, the length of time the enrollee and spouse have lived together, whether the enrollee have been regarded as spouse by neighbors, friends, etc. So we ask for this statement, we ask for the declaration, and they must include a front page of the most recent year's federal and state return, again, documenting that they're together, dependents, and the same requirement for proof of common residency and proof of financial interdependency. So once the employing office has sent out the letter requesting the enrollee to verify family members, at the end of 60 days, the employing office will make one of three decisions. The first one is the employee sent in the information that you asked them for. And so this family member is verified. You would then send them a sample letter that says, we've received your information, it's complete, there's nothing more for you to do. And you place a copy of that letter with a copy to the carrier in the EOPF. The second response would be that there is no response. The employee doesn't respond to you at all, doesn't send any information, does not ask for an extension. So then on day 61, the family member is automatically removed. There should be no surprise because the original letter says that this was what was going to happen. The third letter would be the information that they sent in for the family member doesn't verify them. The original example I gave of having several children, maybe they only send in a birth certificate for the 2 and 3-year-old, but the 4, 5, and 6-year-old, they don't. So that means that the only 2 children that will remain on the FEHB policy are the 2 and 3-year-old. You would remove the 3, 4, and 5-year-old. They do have the reconsideration rights. So these are the 3 decisions, and we have given you sample letters that you can use in order to respond to these employees. And again, please add them to the EOPF and send them a copy to the carrier. And the main reason for that is we do not want the carriers asking for the same employee to verify the same family members. As mentioned, an employee can ask for an extension to provide the information. They may be overseas, something needs to be translated. That's fine. You can work out a new date. We did not define a date, but whatever the date is at that point, if the information is not provided, then the family member will be removed. There are a couple of steps along the way where we want the employing office to keep the FEHB carrier in the loop. You will obtain the enrollment contact from the plan's contact link on the OPM website, and then you will send your letters or your information to the enrollment contact there. We ask that you notify the FEHB carriers when you've requested verification for a family member, when you've removed an ineligible family member, because we need the FEHB carrier to take that family member off of the FEHB plan. They're the only ones that can remove that person. We also need to promptly notify them if there is a reconsideration and you've decided to reinstate a family member that has been removed. We want that person to be put back on promptly. And then lastly, if an ineligible family member is removed, the letter from either you or the carrier gives the employee the right to request a decrease in enrollment type, but they have to submit the SF-29. We're allowing them to use event code 1C, but in this instance, we're only allowing 1C to be used to decrease the enrollment type. 1C does allow them to do other things, change plans, but for the purposes of this guidance, if they're sending in 1C, they can only decrease their enrollment type. So these are the 4 types of communication we want you to send to the FEHB carrier. The FEHB carriers, when they remove family members, we also want them to send you certain types of information. That information is also, if they request verification of a family member, again, we don't want 2 different people asking the same person for the same family member information. We want the carriers to notify you if they remove a family member from FEHB enrollment, because you know they're going to be calling you too. So you need to know, and you need to put a copy of that letter into the employee's file so that it provides the documentation that the family member has been removed for, permanently, so that if the employee moves to another agency or somebody else looks in the file, they can find the letter. In order for the FEHB carriers to contact the employing office, we have created an ABO contact list. We distributed it to the appropriate HR people back in November. It is only for the carriers to contact the ABOs for family member eligibility issues. There are very tight timeframes, as you are aware, 60 days for the employee to submit the documentation or to submit a reconsideration, but also it only gives the agencies 30 days to process a reconsideration request. So we want to make sure that the employing offices have a heads up when someone has been removed, so that you're aware that you will be receiving either questions or a reconsideration request. The default organization for the spreadsheet is by personnel office number. However, we have cross-referenced the POI because we recognize that sometimes you have a self-service system, which is the personnel office number, but the personnel office identifier is more specific. We've also listed it by employee identification number. We're very grateful for the many agencies that provided the detail that is really more than what we expected, and we thank you for that. There were a very few agencies that we did not have a specific HR contact for. So the agency benefit officer is a default person for those carriers to contact, and it will be up to the agency benefit officer to sort that list and send it in a timely manner to the right person. The carriers may contact you for a copy of common law marriage or foster child, because again, the employment office is the only one that can do that. So that is how we've set up for the carriers to contact the agency benefit officers. Last couple of points. The reconsideration process for both the agency and employing offices is with the agencies. Employees have 60 days to request a reconsideration. Again, they can request an extension, but the employing office only has 30 days to make the reconsideration decision. And I want to emphasize that if a family member is reinstated, that they are reinstated back to the point of when they were terminated. It's a retroactive re-enrollment back to that date. And again, remembering all of these letters need to be put into the employee's file. It becomes a permanent record if there's any questions, if the employee moves, and certainly when the employee retires. Okay, so this is our first Q&A session, and I'm going to ask Maggie how we did with our questions, and then we'll answer your questions. Maggie?
Hi, Ursel. So everyone, this is the first time that we're doing this presentation through Teams. So it's a little hard, I've learned, to do a full question through this venue, because it's hard to see who answered in response to what question. And we didn't get that many answers to the question. We got a lot of questions on your presentation ourselves, so you're doing a great job.
Okay.
I would say in response to the first question, maybe about 25 or so attendees indicated they've used the removal guidance.
Okay.
But that could be because people didn't realize to, you know what I mean, to answer the So the second question, how many ineligible family members were removed? Got a few answers, basically from one family member to many. So It sounds like there's been a lot of different experience with that. And the last question was about which type of ineligible family member. Only got one or two responses to that, but it seemed like ex-spouses and children over age 26 were the most common.
Okay, good. That's nice to know. And especially that ex-spouses were being removed, because that is one of the stickier points. We have employees who keep their ex-spouse on their FEHB coverage, and that's a problem. And we usually don't find out about it until they want to add the new spouse. So I'm glad that we're finally have a mechanism to make sure that those ex-spouses are being timely removed. All right. Well, let's move to the Q&A. What kind of questions do we have, Maggie?
We have quite a few questions, and we can get into some that I think go to the heart of what we're trying to get to here. So one, do we have to get birth certificates and marriage licenses for each dependent that is put on the SF 2809 when they are a new enrollment, aka a new employee?
Yes, the verification for initial enroll is going to be the second part of our presentation. I will answer the question briefly now, but the answer is yes.
And I just wanted to ask this one because I think this is helpful for people. Like, how do we get a copy of the verification guidance?
It's posted on OPM's website. If I can find it real quick, which I think I will put it in the Q&A so you can have the link. And you're talking about the verification guides. Remember, this is part one. We're still talking about the removal.
Right. Sorry, I'm just looking through these here. At what times do agency HR offices submit these letters to employees soliciting proof of family member eligibility?
Again, that's our second topic, family member eligibility. I'm going to go over that in a moment. The session I just covered was removal of ineligible family members. So I'll be able to answer that question on part two of our presentation in just a few minutes. Hang in there.
Sorry, Ursula, that's my fault. Okay. We got a question from someone who was concerned about having to show two types of proof for marriage. Mm-hmm. And they mentioned that it would be difficult for themselves to prove this because they don't have certain, joint accounts or things like that to show. And they mentioned a concern about not wanting to show entire financial status as a part of the tax return, of having to submit the tax return. And I guess I just wanted, to make sure that everybody knows that all financial information can be redacted from a tax return. So there's no desire to, find out people's incomes or collect information that employees find to be private. All of that information can be redacted, and it can just show names and, your joint tax.
Yes, actually on the documentation attachment number 2, at the top of it, it says, the following table lists documents that may establish family member eligibility for FEHB coverage. The enrollee may remove personal financial information and Social Security numbers before submission. So yes, we just need those top 2 bars that say that the two of you are, married filing separately or jointly.
And someone asked, can you please provide clarification of what OPM considers substantial? Is there a specific money threshold?
There is no specific money threshold, but the items that I had gone over in that particular slide, you know, if you're regularly providing daycare or covering the child's clothing and doctor visits, you know, over the course of the year, then it seems like that would be sufficient. But we haven't put a particular dollar threshold on that.
Agreed, yeah. And I think, yeah, part of that is that it depends on where you are in your location and, you know, what things cost in your location, what can be substantial. So it's hard for us to put a straight line, right, because things are different in Rhode. Some states like Texas have specific documentation required to be filed to the common law for a common law marriage to be recognized. Does this common law marriage certification replace the state level documentation as proof of marriage?
So the common law marriage certificate says that if you have something from the state, that you can use that. So you would need to send that in, but the HR office still needs to sign a statement that says we've received this from the state and it meets the criteria. So in that instance, they would not need to provide all of this other information on the declaration, but they still have to provide the front page of the most recent tax year's federal or state return and proof of common residency.
And someone said, what if two individuals are recognized as common law marriage, but they file their taxes?
I think we'd have to look at that. The taxes is one way you can do it, or the proof of common residency and financial independence. So you would have to fill out the rest of the information and look at it as a whole.
Is there an effective date for a common law marriage? Is the declaration's date the effective?
The common law marriage is effective when the state, or if it's a state issued, but the common law marriage is basically going to document that these two people have been together. So for our purposes, it seems that the declaration is going to be effective when it's signed off. I'm sure most of the time the relationship has started long before that, but we can't sign off on something retroactively that we've never seen. So I would say that the declaration has to be effective when it's signed off by the employing office staff, but I'm sure the marriage or relationship started at some point before that.
Someone asked, are family members removed retroactively?
In most instances for the removal guidance, it's a prospective disenrollment because we do give them 60 days to send in the documentation, and we tell them that on day 61, this person is going to be removed if you don't provide it. However, we do give agencies a discretion that if there's fraud involved, that discontinuation may be retroactive, which has implications because that means if there were claims paid, the enrollee is going to be on the hook for those claims because the carriers will claw back the money. So in general, it is prospective, but there may be some instances where it's retro.
Great. Under this new guidance, will we have to verify all existing family members who have not been previously verified the next time the employee makes a QLE change? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That's the second part of the presentation on verification of family members. The short answer is that current family members can be grandfathered in, but we gave the agencies options that if you want to verify current family members, all of them, that's fine.
Okay.
Sounds like everybody wanted to hear more about the second part than the first part.
Okay, this person's asking, does the reconsideration request extend the original 60, I think they mean 60-day eligibility window?
No, because they've already been removed when the reconsideration request is going in. They receive the reconsideration rights when the person is terminated. So if the reconsideration is approved, which means that they sent in the documentation that they were supposed to send in the first time but didn't, the person will be reinstated retroactively. But at the point of reconsideration, that family member's eligibility has been terminated. Good questions.
I know, these are good questions. Looking to see, trying to make sure it's related to the right thing. Sorry, yourself.
No problem. We only have just a few people online. We figured this was going to be a little bit of a challenge with this many attendees, but thank you. We have time.
Okay. Okay, I think this is, okay, for the removal of ineligible family members, we can permit the use, or I guess, can we permit the use of 1C for decreases in enrollment type, even if the family member was never eligible? So the family member was never eligible. So is this,
right.
Is this a QLE allowing for
it's not a
change?
It's not a QLE, but we've allowed that event code to be used because it doesn't make sense for either the enrollee or the government to be paying the government share for a plan that only has one or two people on it. So it's not defined as a QLE. We just said, for now, use that event code so that the enrollment type can be decreased. We're working on something in the future, hopefully, to make this a little bit clearer.
Okay. Where can we find the sample letters? That's published with the guidance. Right?
Yes, it's published on the OPM website. I thought I could cut and paste the link into it, but I cannot in this program. But if you go into the OPM website, under the benefit administration letters, the removal guidance is under the 220, and you will find it. I will give you the numbers, BAL 20-203, and it's published November 2020. And there are 5 attachments. Request for verification of family member is attachment number 1. Attachment number 2 is receipt of eligibility verification documentation. Attachment number 3 is verification documents not received. Attachment number 4 is information provided does not verify family member eligibility. And there is an attachment number 5, and I'm looking to make sure that this was updated with the current changes that we made, and it is. So those are the 5 attachments, and 4 of those attachments are sample letters.
Okay, perfect. This was addressed in your presentation, but it's always worth saying one more time. Are agencies required to retain family member eligibility documents? If so, how long? Thank you.
No, you're not required to keep the actual documentation. That is really delving into HIPAA and PII, and it was just too complicated for us to do that. So that's why we provided the letters for you for the removal guidance. And I'll talk more about this. with the verification. But no, there is no requirement for you to keep the actual birth certificate, marriage certificate, whatever. But that is also why we need the sample letters in the EOPF, because if it's audited or another agency comes back and wants to know, we need that documentation in the EOPF.
Oh, someone said on proof of common law marriage, it is mentioned that only the front page of the most recent tax year's federal and state return is needed. Does this mean the agency does not need to ensure the return is signed and filed?
No, that's not our responsibility, but I can't imagine someone. Well, you need the top. That's IRS's responsibility. But you do have the fraud. If for some reason something comes back and this file is audited and they use that as proof of documentation and it comes back that they never filed that tax return, that's going to be on them, and that's a whole nother issue. So remember that there is that fraud signature statement in the SF 2809.
This is not exactly related, but it might be a common question. Employees with a pending divorce always want a spouse removed. We always request a divorce decree. Is this correct?
That is correct. Because they're eligible until the divorce decree is finalized.
And I think we're getting close. If you want to go on to the next part.
Okay. Well, again, they're good questions, and we'll have another Q&A session after the next session, which is going to be part 2, addressing all of these questions that you have about the verification guidance. So I'll answer the questions in more depth that you started to ask me in the next part of the presentation. Family member verification for FEHB, initial opportunities to enroll in qualifying life events. Again, there's a couple of questions that we have for you that Maggie's going to put into the queue while I'm speaking. We'd appreciate if you'd answer those questions just to get some feedback from the audience. And then, again, put in your specific questions that you have that you would like answered. And I'll try to remember the ones that you've already asked. So the guidance was issued in April of this year, 2021, effective July the 15th of 2021, that for all new employees, you must verify family members before they can be added to FEHB coverage. And if an employee has a qualifying life event and they want to add family members, that those family members must be verified before they're added. As stated earlier, if the agency wants to take this opportunity to verify and family members that are already enrolled, you certainly can do that. It's not required. They're grandfathered in, but if you have some issues or some concerns, or if you want to, it's fine with us. We don't really have any issues with that happening at all. We have left open that verification is not required during open season, not because we didn't really want to do it just during open season, but because of the logistics. And we understood it would be a burden on the employing offices and the staffing in order to timely request the documentation, review it, and allow these people to be eligible at the start of open season. However, if there are agencies that may receive a small number of applications during open season, you want to verify it, that's fine. There may be agencies that have a selective subset of family members that you want to verify. That's up to you. We said it's not required that you verify during open season, but we don't have any problems if you choose to do so. So for the initial opportunity to enroll, the enrollee will submit their SF-2809 with family members. In our conversations with agencies, what most and many have been doing is either in the welcome packet for new employees or on their intranet sites, letting the new employees know that when you come in and you want to add your family members, these are the documents you have to have with you. So they've been providing this information in advance. So hopefully with that pre-planning, when the employee comes in to submit their SF-2809, or if it's an electronic process, they have the appropriate documentation that they can give it to you right then and there. If the family members are verified, then you would add in your remarks field the documentation that you reviewed that verified the family member. We are working on an update to the SF-2809 to make this a little bit easier, but as of now, we want you to add at a minimum a note indicating the type of document or documents examined, the document's issue date, and the date of the QLE, if applicable, and the name of the issuing authority. So if it's a birth certificate, it would say birth certificate for this child on this date from the date of Maryland, from the state of Maryland. And so you would put that in the remarks code. I will remind you that currently the remarks field can only take 300 characters. So please be brief. But as I said, we are working on an update so that we can add the family members more easily. And in this instance, then you can submit your SF-2809 with only the verified family members, whether it's by paper or it's through the data hub. Scenario, I'm sorry. In this second scenario, we have an employee who submits an SF-2809 for either a new opportunity to enroll or they have a QLE. But you have some family members that don't have the supporting documentation. So in this instance, the employing office will have to ask the employee to submit a new SF-2809 with only the verified family members in order to enroll. The family members who are denied will be given reconsideration rights. The enrollee will be given reconsideration rights for their family. And so what you will send to the carrier initially is the new SF-2809 with only those family members who have been verified, because the others cannot and will not be covered until they provide the correct supporting documentation. I did talk already about the documentation standards. They are exactly the same as what we talked about for the removing of ineligible family members. So I'm not going to go over that again, but I put it there for reference. Remember too that the FEHB carrier, if an enrollee has a self and family enrollment, can still add family members. The carrier letter requires that the carrier verify documentation. And so they are also asking for the exact same information as if when the enrollee would have contacted the employing office. If the family members are approved, they're added to the existing self and family enrollment type. You will receive a copy of the letter. If the family members are not approved, they're denied, there is an attachment number 3 for the carriers to send the denial of family member enrollment and give them the reconsideration rights. And this is the letter that they will also forward to the employing office so that you have a copy of it, you have a heads up, and that we want you to add to the employee's EOPF so there is a record that this family member has been denied. There may be an instance where they may want to add this family member again, even though they've been denied, but you don't have to go through the entire process. If you have the letter in the EOPF that says this person's been denied, they've been denied. You don't have to, go through the whole thing and give them reconsideration rights again. Reconsideration process, again, is only for the employing office. So the employing office, the enrollee can request a reconsideration within 60 calendar days of the denial of the family member. The employing office has 30 calendar days to make a decision. And that decision is pretty straightforward because the documentation standards are the same on reconsideration as they were initially. There's no difference. It just means that hopefully this time they sent you the information you asked for and it's correct. And if the reconsideration is reversed, then the EO will request yet a new SF-29-809 with all of the family members, the ones that have been previously verified, plus any new people that are being added now. And then you will send that to the carrier. The carrier will then add the family members that are originally denied to the coverage. And so the entire family, if appropriate, will be covered under the FEHB coverage. Again, the eligibility is retroactive to the date of the initial eligibility. All right, so this is a summary of what we talked about in both of the guidances. Employing offices now must verify all family members on the initial opportunity to enroll and all new family members not previously verified for a QLE. We have been working with some of the agencies and some of the electronic systems that may not have documentation upload or HR capabilities. They are in communication with us, but it's our expectation that the paper systems are on board as of July the 15th, and that any electronic systems that are lagging, they will become on board as quickly as possible. And we are in communication with them. The requirements require the FEHB carriers also verify new family member eligibility for all enrollees if someone calls in to add a new spouse or a new child. Both the employing offices and the FEHB carriers can remove ineligible family members. Both have the authority to request the documentation to support family member eligibility. But only the employing office can verify and certify a foster child or complete the common law marriage declarations. So this will be one of the probably the larger things that you may be receiving requests for, either from the carrier or possibly from the employee themselves, because the employee will need to provide the agency with the supporting documents so that you can sign and complete the required documents. Remember that employees only have 60 calendar days to provide supporting documentation. They can request an extension, but you too need to work out what the date of the extension is. Once that date arrives, the employing office can remove them. The employee can request a reconsideration within 60 days of the denial or removal, but only the employing office can perform reconsiderations for either the employing office or the carrier. The decision is required from the employing offices within 30 days, and any reinstatements or reversal of a denial are retroactive to the date of the initial eligibility or QLE, or the termination for an ineligible family member. All right, so now we go to our second Q&A session, and hopefully I answered some of the questions that had come up earlier, but if not, I'll answer them now. So Maggie, how are we doing? What are our results?
So I'm just going to be honest, I can't track it at all.
Okay.
This long list of answers on my side column, and I mean, of people's responses, and I can't follow it. But yeah. So sorry about that.
No problem. Any general observations though when you were doing your little side column?
Let's see. Yeah. On average, how many family members were being added? I got, 3 to 4, 1 or 2. Sounds like there's variation there, which is what we would expect.
Mm-hmm.
On average, how many children under age 26 are being added to FEHB enrollments? That's a few less, right?
Okay.
2 children or so. And I didn't really get many answers to number 3.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of variation among the 600 group that's logged in here.
Yes,
so yeah.
We're just trying to get some information for our systems and our just thought process. As I said, we're working on changing the SF 2809 to make it a little bit more accommodating for adding family members. So just trying to obtain some information to figure out which way to go with that, and about how many we needed to add. And so any comments that you have are welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and there'll be my understanding is there'll be some time after this where we can kind of look through these a little more carefully and
Okay.
glean if there's anything. Yeah.
All right. Well, then let's move on to Q&A. What questions do they have?
Okay. Let's see. I saw this question a few times, and I'm not sure that we have an answer. So maybe we should acknowledge it and get back on it. A few people asked a question about having a hospital letter for a newborn instead of a birth certificate, since sometimes it takes 2 to 3 weeks to get a birth certificate. I didn't know if you had an answer.
Yes, the guidelines do allow a certificate of live birth to be used until the birth certificate is issued. So you can do that.
Okay, perfect. Let's see. Some people asked about whether you have to do the verification for an employee who's being transferred. So if an employee gets transferred to a new agency, do they need to do the family member verification at that point?
If the family members have not been verified, the answer would be yes. But this gets back to the information being in the SF 2809. In the EOPF, excuse me. If there's documentation that the family members have already been verified, then the answer would be no. Because many times they're going to send you the SF 2809 that was used to enroll, so you can see the remarks in that SF 2809, but then also once that EOPF is transferred, you would see the documentation in there if removal guidance was used to obtain it. So I hope that answered the question.
Yep, sounds right. Let's see. Someone asked, what is the BAL number for the new verification requirement announced back in April?
That is, the BAL is 21-202, issued April the 15th of 21.
Someone asked, do you send the verification letter and the documentation to the carrier or just the verification letter?
With the verification, you're documenting what you've looked at the bottom of the SF 2809. And so when you send that over, it would transmit. Now, we do acknowledge that all of the remarks don't go through the data hub. So the carrier may call you back and say, is this verified or not? But you wouldn't send the documentation at all or any letters. You're still just sending the actual SF 2809 for either a new employee or for a qualifying life event. Because remember, they have to have the SF 2809 to be enrolled in the FEHB.
Okay. Here's one. New employee sends an SF 2809 on the very last day of the 60-day window with no family member verification documents. Send denial letter, but the new employee does not send back a new 2809 with only the employee. Did that employee just lose eligibility for FEHB?
It sounds like it until open season because they only have 60 days. Unless they've got some really outrageous extenuating circumstances to why they did that. But the regulations are clear. You make your initial election within 60 days. So it sounds to me that that employee is going to need to wait until open season.
Yeah. And if it's an extenuating circumstance, there is a belated opportunity. But you're right, it would have to be a reason why they missed it.
Right. But that also gets to the employing offices, agencies notifying employees before they start, or that they need to bring in this documentation when they start their employment. So that gets into the agencies taking the responsibility to notify new employees and existing employees that we must have this documentation and that there are no exceptions.
Okay. If an employee is removing an ex-spouse as a QLE due to divorce, can that person also add a stepchild during that time if they are financially responsible for the stepchild?
It seems like the stepchild is probably already on there. I'd have to look at that to look at the fine print, but it seems if the employee is still responsible for the stepchild can stay on the insurance. But if the divorce decree removes the responsibility for the stepchild from the enrollee, then the answer would be no. So really
and I think I think they have to live with in a parent-child relationship as well.
Yes.
So it's not just financial, it's physical residency as well.
Exactly. So the enrollee would need to maintain responsibility for that child, even though there is a divorce. And that's the details of the divorce decree.
Okay. If an employee doesn't submit the family member documentation with the original 2809, once they submit the documentation, possibly 60 days after the effective date of the enrollment, what will be the effective date of their coverage for the family member just verified?
As long as it's within that 60-day window, the family member would be eligible on the first day that the employee is eligible, which is the first pay period, after they're submitted it to the employing office.
Right. It's the date of the enrollment. So yeah, There's no complicated differing effective dates for.
No.
Oh, When there are employees who want to remove a family member from a self and family plan, the OPM website states the employee should contact the carrier. However, majority of the time, the carrier denies this and makes the employee go back to the agency HR. What is the proper process?
That's a hard question. I think we're going to have to get back to you on that because I'd have to look at the website. The carrier needs to remove the person because the carrier has the enrollment. So even if they go to the agency right now doesn't send any information to the carrier. So we're working on some documentation or changes in order to remove, these types of people. And we'll have to keep that in the loop to get that a little bit cleaner. But at the end of the day, the carrier is going to have to be the one to remove the person from the enrollment.
Yeah, and I think this is addressed Ursel too, and the eligibility verification guidance, in the sense that we told the carriers that they need to do the verification, right, for an existing enrollment where changes are made. So we recently updated the carriers again on their responsibilities there, right? So hopefully this is going to be better.
Right, but remember, I think the question was, the carriers don't want to remove them. They want the agency to remove them. But at the end of the day, the carrier is the one that carries the enrollment, not the agency.
Right. But yeah, we gave them updated guidance, so they should be following it. We'll see. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm just...
No problem. I know you're it's a little bit. Okay. I see a question, and I'll just jump to it to give you a few minutes to look at what you have. It's a question that says, in the case of an enrollee who wants to drop self+1 due to a child reaching age 26, do we need to also view the birth certificate if we don't have the EOPF records? And so that is removing, you would look at the birth certificate, but in many cases, the carriers are automatically removing those enrollees from their plans, the family members, when they turn 26. So the enrollee probably has a letter from the carrier that says your child has reached age 26 or will reach 26 and will be terminated. The letter instructs them, if they want to decrease their enrollment type, to contact the agency, because they do need to submit the SF 2809 to do that. So they can send you the letter that the carrier sent them, or they can send you the child's birth certificate, and you can verify the child is turned 26 and is no longer eligible for FEHB coverage.
Okay, Ursel, I have a good one.
I'm scared already.
No, this is a good one. How can we confirm the carriers have our agency HR POC for providing this information? Or will the carrier be notifying payroll office? We have a shared service for our payroll and prefer carriers contact HR. We have a good answer to this question, right?
Yes, we do. We do have a good answer because, as I said, we set up an ABO, an agency benefit officers contact list, and we surveyed the agency benefit officers and asked them who they wanted to be the contact person for any family member eligibility. So the carriers are going to follow the list that we sent them that says who they're supposed to contact. And so there are some of the shared service providers also provide HR benefits, and the ABO and the shared service provider agreed that they would contact the shared service provider, and the shared service provider was going to take care of it. But we did not determine who the contact was. The agency benefit officer did. And so we have that list, and that is what the carriers are using to contact. So if you want to make a change to that, I would suggest that you get in touch with your agency benefit officer and let us know who the new contact would be.
Thanks, Ursel. Another good one here. Will the instructions and QLE chart on the SF2809 be updated to include the information about family member documentation?
We are in the process of working through that. We just started our integrated project team to work through updates to the SF2809 for family members and some other issues that we have identified. So yes, we are in the process of doing that, hopefully soon, but I can't give you an exact date.
This is another effective date question that we've kind of gotten at, but just make sure people have it. In the case of childbirth, if we receive the birth certificate a month after the birth, would we backdate the 2809 to the date of birth or use the effective date of when the birth certificate was received?
So remember, someone is enrolled when they send in the SF2809. So if this child was born a month ago, unless they already have a self and family enrollment, it's going to be effective when you change the enrollment type to include self and family. So if they have a self and family enrollment, the child can be covered because they have the enrollment. But if they're changing the enrollment type, the SF2809 is not effective until the first pay period after it's been received by the payroll office. So hopefully that makes that a little bit clearer.
Okay.
Again, really good questions. Thank you so much. Helps us understand what's not clear.
Okay, I think you also kind of went over this one, but let me just make sure. Is there a self and family plan? If there is a self and family plan, I'm sorry, let me just start over. Okay, if there is a self and family plan and they add a new family member, do we have to verify the existing member?
You don't have to verify the existing because the existing are basically grandfathered in. But if you want to verify all of the family members, you can. We didn't require it because the FEHB has about 4.2 million enrollees and family members, excuse me. And if we required everyone to verify all of them, it would create a whole lot of chaos. So we took the position we will grandfather in the current enrollees. New ones will be verified. However, if the employee office wants to verify someone who's currently on the rolls, then feel free to do so.
Another one related. Is it correct that you are requiring all open season elections to have a verification process if they are electronically submitted?
We have carved out open season as not requiring verification of documentation because of the volume of transactions. But if you have an electronic enrollment system that has an documentation upload feature and you have the staff to verify that information, you can do so. It's not a requirement for us. And I want to mention too that with open season, although it's not required in open season, it doesn't mean that after open season, when things are calmer and you start looking through some of your enrollments and you have questions, that you can't go back to your removal of an eligible family member guidance and ask for the supporting documentation that you did not receive during open season. There also are electronic systems that can receive documentation, but they don't have anyone to actually look at it at the time of open season. I think most of them keep the documents for a short period of time. So it is also conceivable that after open season, the HR person may have a chance to go in and, look at some of that supporting documentation before, while it's still available, even though they are enrolled technically. But again, you always have that removal of ineligible guidance to go back to. So at any time that you find something that's questionable, you can ask for verification and they have to send it to you.
Okay. This question is about eligibility.
Maggie, you're breaking up.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. This question is just about foster child eligibility, and I'm going to go ahead and put it out there because it can be confusing, so it's always worth addressing.
Hang on, you're still breaking up a little bit.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
All right. Now you're clear.
Is it better?
Yes.
Okay. I'll try to just ask the question. It's related to foster child eligibility or so, not as much the verification, but what if we receive a court order for an employee to add their grandchild on their FEHB coverage as they have 50% custody? Would this qualify as a foster child or would they be denied? And I was just going to note for people that a court order for 50% custody would not qualify as a foster child. They need to look at the foster child certification, look at all the requirements that are there in terms of, living with and providing substantial support, et cetera, and make sure that they meet those and provide evidence of that and provide the foster.
Right, because there's a bunch of things that are listed under the foster child. So that's an excellent question. Thank you.
Okay. To confirm, a first-time enrollee must provide birth certificate and marriage license to allow the enrollment, I guess the family member's enrollment into the plan.
Yes, the marriage certificate is valid, only the marriage certificate if the marriage is a year or less. If the marriage is more than a year, you need the marriage certificate, plus you have to provide the support that they are still married. And that could be either the front page or the top of the front page of a federal or state tax return and proof of common residency and their financial independency. So again, the issue was that we had employees who were required to provide spousal support after divorce, but a spouse equity plan is the divorced spouse enrolls in that, and they pay all of the premium plus the administrative costs. The employee cannot keep a divorced spouse on their FEHB coverage. That is not legal.
Okay, are agencies only to verify QLEs as of the BAL? If not, how far back do we need to go?
We're looking at current or upcoming QLEs. We're not looking to go back and do audits. We're not looking to go back and do retrospective reviews of people who are already family members who enroll. As I stated, we consider family members grandfathered in, but if going through your documentation, you find something that's suspicious, you can ask for the removal guidance through the removal guidance to support that family member's eligibility, but their removal is going to be prospective because you ask for the documentation, you give them 60 days to provide it. It's not until day 61 that that person is removed. So unfortunately, they may have been on the rolls for a while. We can't, that's unfortunate. We can't resolve that, but at least they're not going to continue to stay on the rolls forever.
Okay. Okay.
You're doing a great job, Maggie. I know that's a lot of questions to go through. Thank you for
No,
helping.
yeah, no problem. Okay. It's just a lot of these I think we've addressed, Ursel. That's why you know what I mean? I'm scrolling through.
No.
Okay. It seems like some people may be confused with the grandfathered in idea, Ursel. Maybe do you want to just say that one more time about, you know, who they have to verify in the case of a QLE? I'm sorry, I know you've said it a few times.
Sure. So in the case of a QLE, say you have a family, an enrollee who is already in a family plan, they have a QLE and they want to add new family members. The requirement is that you would verify only the new family member. If the spouse is already on there, you don't have to verify them, even though they may not have been verified in the past. So it's only the new people that have to be verified. What I said about current enrollees is that if an employing office wants to optionally ask for verification of a current enrollee, you can do so, but you are not required. We're not looking for a full-scale audit of all of the family members. As I said, we have family members that have been on the FEHB coverage for the entire course of an employee's career, their wife, 20, 30 years, and there are a lot of them, 4.2 million. So it would be pretty chaotic for us to try to do a full-scale review of 4.2 million enrollees. So right now with the verification guidance, we're focused on verifying new employees and new family members that come on as a result of a QLE.
Okay, one question here, and I'm not sure. Someone said I thought for the
You're breaking up again a little bit.
shoot. Someone said I thought for the birth of a child, the insurance was effective the beginning of the pay period that the child was born. Please clarify, and that is true. If a QLE to change to a self and family to cover a child is due to a birth of a child, that is retroactive to the beginning of the pay period that the child was born. That's a different rule in the regulation. So just wanted to make sure that was clear, because I
Okay, thanks
people
for
asking
clarifying.
about it. Yeah. Okay.
I see one that's a little bit interesting. It says, what is the procedure for verifying the eligible family members for employees transferring from a state that recognizes common law marriage to the one that does not? Will the agency or carrier be doing the verification? Again, the agency is the only one that can verify a common law marriage, but there are only about 10 states that recognize common law marriage. So you can't certify a common law marriage in a state that doesn't recognize the common law marriage. In the states that recognize common law marriages, they either give them a marriage certificate or they have certain criteria that they have to meet in order to be recognized. So the employee and the common law marriage can only be certified in a state that recognizes common law marriage. Now, going forward, if you have a new employee that has the common law marriage certificate from someplace else, and it's in their file, you would need to accept it. But you cannot certify a common law marriage outside of a state that recognizing that a common law marriage is recognizable, if that makes sense.
It does. If they move out of this, like if the couple lived in a state that recognized common law marriage, and they move out of that state, or they met the requirements in the state that recognized the marriage, and they move out of that state, we still recognize it, right? But you can't, right? But it can't be recognized in a state, or consummated, I guess, in a state that doesn't recognize it, right? Agreed.
Right.
Okay. Well, I think we've gone through quite a few of these questions or so that are related to the presentation.
Great. I do see another one that looks interesting. It says, if someone is removed retroactively, if yes, they are due a refund of premiums. But with the removal guidance, the removals are always prospective. And I know that there are some instances when someone may be removed retroactively because of fraud. But Maggie, are they entitled to a refund of those benefits? Premiums?
So if it involves a change in enrollment type, so say you had a self +1 and then you remove the ex-spouse due to fraud, and it turns out that you should have been in self only, then yes, because the government is also receiving a refund of premiums for a large percentage. So that's the reasoning there.
Great, thank you. Maggie is our policy person, so that's why I teamed up with her. So I want to thank each and every one of you for your time, for your attention, for your questions. As a reminder, in order to receive your credit for this session, you'll need to complete the post-session survey. I don't have an exact date of when that will be available to you, but once you complete that, then you'll receive your certification. You should have received a copy of the slides before the presentation. If not, they'll be available to you in the portal. I want to thank Maggie. I really, really appreciate your help with this. And I thank each of you for your time. So enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thank you. Bye-bye.